Good. All right, let me go ahead and bring up my slides here. Let me go ahead and pull this out here, actually. Let me go ahead and pull in my, where'd my slides go? Over here. Yep, and there they are. All right, so let me go ahead and go into present mode here. Perfect. All right, so welcome to Conversation, from Conversation to Client. So this is going to be really, really high level stuff. I tend to work with companies that are doing pretty well, corporations or online businesses that are doing well. So I tend to teach some pretty heavy depth. So you might want to watch the replay on this, make sure to have some notes handy as we go through this. But basically, I want to take you from being in a conversation with a prospect to bringing them to a client. And in particularly today, we're going to talk about what's called pre-call authority building, what to do before the call to make sure that you come across as an expert and that they like you, trust you, and see you as the answer to their problems before you even get on the call with them. What to do, again, after the inquiry, like this could be a referral, this could be someone who's, a website inquiry or whatever, but what's the flow? What are the call sequences and those kind of things? Then we'll actually go through some frameworks on how to have these conversations. So I'm not a big fan of scripts, but I am a big fan of frameworks and really having a framework in mind before you enter any conversation with a potential prospect. I'm going to go through that. And then briefly touch on a couple example emails. What do you do if they go cold on you or they just kind of fall out of this process? Give you a couple of email scripts and ideas you can use there to reactivate and re-engage them for your business. So let's talk about pre-call authority building. So this is basically, there's a few different pieces to this, and it really depends on the source of the lead or the source of the prospect. How warm of a traffic source did they come from? And so your pre-call authority building will have different intensities depending on the lead source. So what I mean by pre-call authority building is you want them to start consuming, either hear about you, think favorably about you, consume some content from you, etc., before they even get on a call with you. You don't want someone who's barely heard of you, barely has any trust with you or anything like that getting on a call with you. It makes it much more difficult. So it depends on the amount of pre-call authority building depends a bit on the lead source. So referral, for example, is the warmest. These are people that, maybe you have talked to a friend or a friend has referred them over and they've talked you up already. There's not as much pre-call authority building that you need to do in this case. Now, it varies a little bit. You still want to have a conversation with them, make sure they're qualified, make sure they understand who you are a little bit and things like that. But in most cases, you don't need to go super hard on the pre-call authority building. So for example, I had a friend of mine in the online marketing space ping me on Facebook Messenger saying, hey, I have a client who wants their webinar looked at and wants it improved. And we talked a little bit back and forth. He just did an introduction within Messenger. I spoke with the gentleman and went back and forth. He was definitely qualified. And then from there, got on a call and did a one call close pretty much in that case into a webinar assessment, webinar audit offer. Now this wasn't, so I didn't really I didn't give him any videos to watch or any articles to look over, anything like that necessarily. Sometimes what I'll do is give my testimonial page in this case, like, hey, here's a few people I've worked with recently. So you want to have those kind of things in your back pocket. You want to have, testimonials. If you're not collecting those, you need to start interviews with clients. That's really good pre-call authority building. An article, if you've been featured or written for a large publication, could be good in some cases. If you don't have any of that, just have like a video that kind of walks through some of the successes that you've had. So that you can pre-frame them and pre-authority build as much as you can. But referrals, pretty minimal. Someone who's semi-cold is going to require a little bit more pre-call authority building. So someone who's maybe on your email list, maybe it's an intro from someone you don't know as well, but they just kind of knew your name. So this is referral I would say is the warmest. These are people that, like a close colleague of yours. Hey, you should talk to John. He's really good at this. He'll do this and this for you. He's helped these people. He's really good. But that's more or less all the authority building you need. You can maybe send them a little something before you get on the call. But, when it's semi-cold, like your email list, I'm talking about like a prospect list, not a customer list, that people that maybe they've heard your name, you've been in their inbox, they've seen you on Facebook or whatever, Google, all those things, or they're an intro from somebody doesn't know you as well. You're going to want to send them something. So like for me, it's like, if it's an email, I'll usually do a little email exchange, tell me what your goals are, tell me where you're at. And then we may agree to get on a call together. But before the call, I'll send them, here's a video, or here's a speech I did, or here's an interview on a podcast I did, or, I find that like short videos or articles are best. I find that people won't take the time to listen to podcasts as much just because it's a time commitment thing. So I like sharing like video or an article in this case. Like I have a speech I gave at a conference a couple of years ago. I'll use that as sort of just, even if they don't go through it, just so they see like the intros and see the authority building and all that kind of stuff before we get on a call. And then if it's a cold website inquiry or through a funnel or something like that, that's obviously going to require even more filtering. So let's talk about that a little bit. So don't let this scare you. This is what I call my top 10 filter funnel. It's a funnel I've used the last few years to get qualified leads from my website, from marketing funnels, and in which case I can filter them. I can get more information on them. I can pre-frame them before the call to see me as an authority. So really what the part I'm talking about here is from this calendar, questionnaire, pre-frame, pre-call emails, and then all this stuff before the enrollment call. So if and I'll show you what it looks like on my site in a second, but yeah, so this is really what it looks like. You can have an opt-in to a lead magnet, and then from there, a page that bridges them to a call. This could be on your website, or you could be running ads to it, organic traffic, whatever, or it could be a webinar to all of these things. But for colder website inquiries, I like to have a questionnaire in here, in addition to the calendar, that asks specific questions. Now, I don't have time to go through all the specific questions that you would ask on there, because there's ways to strengthen that questionnaire to filter out people more or less, depending on how many calls you want to take. And then there's some pre-call content. So this all happens automatically: calendar booking, pre-call, or questionnaire, pre-call authority building, homework kind of page, pre-call authority building, email sequence that drips out. I mean, I'm encouraging people. For me, I filter them extremely hard for my website because I only want to speak with people I feel like have a potential to partner with me or collaborate with me. So I put a lot of filtering before this. So let me show you what it looks like here in my website. So let's say someone searches webinar coach or something like that. I'm the #1 inquiry in the world on Google for webinar coach. Same thing for webinar consultant. I'm up here at the top. And webinar expert, I'm up here at the top of that search as well. And so, these add up to a few hundred searches a month. But, let's say from there, people come to my website. I've never heard of these people before in my life. So they're going to be a cold website inquiry. They come to my website and they'll either do a few things. They could opt in right here for my guide, in which case they'll be presented with a page with a small video that warms them up to me and an option to book a call and fill out the questionnaire, etc. Some of them will contact me here or use the live chat, or they'll just come to this build my webinar button at the top. So I have a few entry points for them. If they opt in, if they've come right to wanting something done for them, I give them different pathways to book a call with me. I have some authority building on this page, all that kind of stuff. They'll come to a page that looks like this, where, I'll have a short video here for them to watch, and some copy, a place for them to book a call, some more authority building, testimonials. Then they'll fill out a questionnaire to work with me, and then they'll go to a page where they'll then, have some content that I'll have them start doing their homework on before the call. So by the time they get to me, they've seen a number of authority pieces already. And, I encourage people to Google me and do all this kind of stuff. Now, if you don't have any of that, just like I say, have an authority article or a video that you can use for that, because, you're going to want to have some assets, some marketing materials that you can leverage to build some authority before the call. And again, it's very much going to be dependent on these things, the referral source, the lead source. Referrals don't need as much. Obviously, you can have a conversation in many cases and get on a call. Semi cold is going to need, a little bit of back and forth and some content up front, like your article or video. And obviously, we just walk through kind of a cold website inquiry thing where you're going to want people to tell you about themselves so that you can decide, is this a good call to get on or not? So let's go through what I now call the post-enquiry flow. Post-enquiry flow. And what this is kind of the call sequence. So I'm going to go through the frameworks of what those calls can sound like in a moment. But right now I want to go through kind of what the flow would be of like call 1, call 2, those kind of things. So different business models will dictate the flow. So you'll either have like a high flow, like group coaching business, or a productized service business where you're looking to bring on a lot of people consistently, dozens, if not hundreds of clients at a time. You're going to set up your post-inquiry call structure a little different than a low flow consulting or partnership model. So that's been my model most recently is the low flow consulting and partnership model. So I have a different call sequence than somebody who's, let's say, running ads into that funnel that we just looked at, and they have a high flow coaching business where they're looking to talk to a lot of people and those kind of things. So the high flow post-inquiry would look something like this. So, let's say, again, you're running ads or you're getting cold traffic and you want a lot of volume. And so they've booked with you, they've watched your webinar, or they've booked on your website or whatever, and they've filled out the questionnaire. They've started to receive some of the pre-call content to build some authority. They're then going to get to call number 1. Now, some people, and this is what I would recommend you do if you're taking on a lot of calls and you're looking for a lot of clients in your business model, is to have a short call first. So some call this a triage call, or I call it a filter call, where it's basically a 15-minute call, and we'll go through what to say in this call in a moment, that does a few things. It gets you to build some rapport, gets you to understand what they want to do, where they want to go, what's stopping them. And then at the end, you'll say something like, hey, this sounds like something we could help with. Let's set up a deeper strategy call. You'll send them some kind of homework beforehand. So usually that's something around getting their numbers together. If you're in B2B, like, make sure before the next call that you understand what your average customer lifetime value is, or a close estimate to that. Make sure that you have like your email list numbers and all those kind of things in place, so that it's clear for the person during the strategy call, where you go into kind of the solutions, what assets that person has. And they can even send them to you before the call, or you can discuss it during the call. And then the second call is that 45 to 60-minute strategy call, where you recap some of the pains that they had and some of the directions they wanted to go, provide the solution, tie it to some outcomes, go through the price and the objections and that whole process, which I'll cover in a second. A low flow post-inquiry model would look something like this. So, and it doesn't have to look like this, and I don't follow this exactly every time, but this is for you if you're doing the partnership model, where you're looking to partner with companies on a performance basis, the sliding scale, which I talked about in my first training in this series on how to make your offer more irresistible, which has to do with like fee plus percentage, those kind of deals, where you're looking to work with less but bigger companies, and you're looking to scale through deal size instead of just volume. This is the model I'm currently using, and it works really well. It's definitely a little more individualized work for you at times, but it can also be very lucrative in some cases here. So anyway, the low flow post-inquiry model, the call sequence. So again, I've got their questionnaire. They've been looking at content of mine. They get to the first call, and I usually make that first call a little longer. And the reason for that is, again, I'm looking for specific partners and clients to work with. And these could be, $30,000 to over $100,000 deals. And again, how do I know that there's a potential for that? Well, I get the questionnaire and I start the conversation before that first call. So before I even get to the first call, I know how much, their revenue and, their profit margin, what their timelines are, what they're looking to accomplish, all this stuff. And there's a good potential for them to be a fit for my fee plus percentage type of situations. So I'm willing to invest more than the 15 minutes at that point. So again, I go through their visions and problems. We'll go through the specifics in a moment. So I'll usually host the first call. And then what I'll do is send like a video overview of some ideas and solutions that we could work on. Now, people really like this, particularly if you're giving up front. Now, you're not going to do this if you're running ads and having to filter through a bunch of people, because it would be too much work. But again, I'm looking for, in this case, a strong handful of clients who have big dollar potentials. And so I'm willing to give a lot up front. And I can tell you that separates me tremendously from all the other people out there doing this. And I close a lot more deals because of this. So anyway, I'll send a video overview. You can just do this on something like Loom, very simple to use, and record a screen share, a little presentation. Doesn't have to be anything too crazy. Put it together maybe in an hour or less. And then I'll have a second call with them where I'll go through the solutions I shared with them, and we'll go through kind of the working together strategy call process, which I'll cover in a second. And then what I'll usually do, not always, but if it's a bigger deal and we want to get something in writing, I'll send over an agreement in a Google document with comments enabled so that we can kind of sit on the same side of the table and co-finalize the agreement. So I'm a big fan, and this has helped me tremendously this past year in particular, close bigger deals like in the 15 to 30 to 50,000 plus range by sitting on the same side of the table with the right people, instead of just simply me versus you. Here's my fee, take it or leave it. I've been much more like, let's come to a fair agreement for both sides using a sliding scale with bigger and better clients. And that's worked really well for me this year. But anyway, the Google document send, it again is another gesture. Hey, let's come up with a fair agreement. Let's have you look it over, make sure you're comfortable, make sure I'm comfortable. Then I'll set up a final call to review, make final changes, and then close the deal. So that is an example of a low flow sequence that I've been using lately. I can't say I use it each time, every time, but if it's a bigger deal where there's like a performance deal involved and things like that, then this is a process I tend to follow. Grab a quick sip here of my coffee. How are we doing on time here? And about 20 minutes in. So let's talk about frameworks to use. So let's go through kind of the flow of these conversations that you're going to have. And I'm going to start with a high flow model, which includes a filter, a triage call, and a strategy session. So we just went through those. So the first call is the triage or filter call. So these are some of the questions, and I literally have these on Google Documents. I'm so familiar with them, I basically have them memorized now, and I know how I want to conduct a conversation. But for you, and even for me, I should be reviewing this regularly, or even having it open on my computer while I'm on a call with someone. So again, filter, triage calls. If you're getting a high flow, meaning you're running ads or you're getting a lot of inquiries from a lead generation source, you want to kind of filter out people quickly before you invest a lot of time in them. These are short, like 15-minute calls. You'll ask, what made you reach out to me right now? So you want them to start again talking about why they wanted to reach out to you. Again, what's your vision? So I usually ask people, tell me what do you want to do and what you're looking to do. Where do you want to go? Basically tell me where you want to go and what you're looking to do. So I want to know what's their vision for what they want to do. And I'm going to let them talk. So these are very open-ended conversation questions. And then I want to know, what are the roadblocks? So what do you feel like you need help with? It's a very casual way to put it. So tell me where you like to go. And they're going to talk about, oh, I'd like to set up this or do that and, have this in there. Okay, cool. Then you understand, you kind of have your piece of paper next to you, and I'm taking notes a little bit on a blank sheet of paper, an old-fashioned pen and paper. So I write down where they want to go. And then I'll talk about, okay, so what do you feel like you need help with? Or what are the roadblocks that are stopping you from getting there? Well, I'm just not confident in this, or I don't really have a clear strategy for that. Okay, cool. And you're writing that down as you go. If they're qualified, then I'll tell them I think I can help them. And I'll talk a little bit about how we might work together briefly. But again, this is a 15-minute call. So again, this is a high flow model. And so you'll say something like, good, well, based on what you've told me, I feel like our offer can help you. What I'd like to do is just set up a little deeper call to go through some more specifics of how we would work together and those kind of things. So let's set up another time right now. Are you available in the next, are you this Wednesday or Thursday? And you try to set the next call on the first call. You try not to leave any open ends if you can help it. And so you would set the next call. That's your strategy session. You would review their goals and problems. And then you would present the solution talk about the solutions that your offer solves, talk about the outcomes. So if we decide to work together, here is what we could accomplish. We could solve X roadblock. We could remove this roadblock and speed up the time and get you to the result a lot faster. Here's how we would do it. So you review the how. And again, you briefly go through the how. So here's how we would do it, and share the logistics. So we'll start off with like a 90-minute offer optimization call where we're going to get your offer dialed in so that it has a much higher sell rate. It's much more attractive, blah, 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 blah. And then we're going to set up an initial marketing plan. From there, we're going to check in weekly for 45 minutes to go through blah, 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 or something. Or you'll meet with a coach weekly for this, or whatever your model is. So you're going to share the logistics, but do it at a high level. People kind of want to see, how does this look, or what does this look like for that. So you can even create a video before this call and just send it out like a couple hours before. Don't send it out too early so they cancel, but send it out an hour or so before, that kind of talks about the logistics of how you work with people. Then you get into price. So price is, then you just, so you don't reveal the price and the logistics. Most people say, well, if we work together, we'll have 3 calls, a month and do this and that, and most people don't do enough of the really getting their vision, their roadblocks, the outcome picture that you paint for them. And they get into pricing and logistics and the features too soon. So you want to kind of go down this order. And you'll talk about price. So like 3 payments of $2,000 or $5,000 paid in full, PIF, or whatever your price is for you. And then you're going to shut up, and then you're going to just listen and see what they say. And they may be like, yeah, that's great. That sounds perfect. Let's get started. Awesome. You can take payment on the phone. It's often recommended. You can use something like Square, the app on your phone, or whatever kind of thing you use for invoicing. I've been using Square for a while. And you'll get started, or you can send them an invoice. But generally, if you can take money on the phone, especially in these high flow models, it's a good thing. Then you're going to address objections. So like they may say, yes, I'm in, but many times they'll have some other questions like, the price, that seems a little high, or time. Well, I don't know if I have enough time, or skill. Maybe I can't do this. I'm not good enough, or maybe this doesn't fit what I'm looking for. Some of those objections. And so you need to be pre-prepared with your statements for those. So let's talk about objections. There's universal objections, and there are product-specific objections. And universal objections, so one you should all be ready to address and ready to answer, are price and time. Those are going to be universal on every webinar you host, every sales conversation or enrollment conversation you have. You need to be ready for people who may have a pricing objection. So for example, let's talk about how to counter some of these, or how to improve the likelihood that they don't stop your sale, assuming that you actually want to work with this person. So if they're kicking and screaming too much, or they're blah, 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 yeah, usually they're maybe not the best client. Their best clients, they get it. They're willing to invest. But anyway, so let's say price. So the other day I was speaking with a gentleman from Cyprus who found me through Google, and he wanted me to look over he wanted to have a VSL created, basically a smaller version of a webinar to book calls for his SEO service company. And we got to the pointy end of the conversation, which is the price and all of that kind of stuff. And we talked about, so I talked about, here's my price for a long form webinar. Here's my price if I were to build out your short form webinar, if you wanted something completely redone. And I gave him that price, and it wasn't cheap. And he said, he's like, oh man, that's kind of expensive. It kind of felt expensive to him. He was a nice guy. I could see that he had a good chance of success. I could see he was going to be easy to work with. So I wanted to work with the guy. So what I did eventually was just I downsold him to basically an audit, because he already had a bit of a slide deck in place. It was okay, but not that great. So all I did was provide a framework for him to follow and a couple of consulting sessions for a pretty good fee. It wasn't the done for you kind of fee, but it was a good fee. And yeah, so he ended up closing on the spot for that. So my point is, be prepared to offer installment plans. Be prepared to have a downsell or a try me offer. I've talked about that if you followed me at all. If you're a consultant or a service provider, is there a way they can try you? Is there a shorter time frame, faster problem you can solve so that you can make it easier for them to start a working relationship with you? So have your offer stack in place. Look, if they look qualified and they're a good fit for your highest offer, start with that. If they squeam on that, they're either not a good fit, or maybe they are a good fit, but it's just maybe the price is a bit much and you still want to work with them. Be prepared to offer installment plans. Be prepared to offer a try me offer or something like that, assuming you want to work with them. So be ready for that. That's a very common objection you're going to get. Time. Now, this is a tricky one. Sometimes, and you have to be honest with your prospects or potential partners, maybe the timing isn't right for them. Sometimes big deals, especially if you're in the deal-making space, take time. And so if something's really not a good timing for them, then that may be a legitimate reason not to do it right now. But time usually means prioritization. And so have some statements in your back pocket ready to address prioritization. So, for example, I would get this one sometimes. Well, let me put together a webinar first. And so I don't know if the timing's right. Let me go ahead and put it together first, and then let's circle back in a few weeks, and I'll have you look it over. Usually when that happens, nothing comes out of it. So what I would want to counter with was, you could do that, but if you wanted to save even more time and money and get the strategy laid out correctly the first time, you and I could work together to build this out now, so that you don't have to spend all this time redoing stuff and yada, yada, yada later, wasting more time and more money. So that, just something like that. Time is usually the trickiest one, but have some prioritization parries in place. Literally have a Google document on your computer that you study and go through, or even have it open on your first few calls to address the timing objection. Their skills. I don't know if I can do it. So this is particularly if you're selling to beginner markets, mass markets. They'll often have things like, well, I don't know, this sounds complicated, or I don't know if I can do what you're telling me I can do. Part of that is how you structure your presentations, like on your webinars or VSLs. Part of that is also, how you position your offer and those type of things. I just audited a webinar recently from a guy who's had a pretty successful funnel, but redid the messaging because he's looking to up-level his clientele. And kind of messed this part up because he was making it sound way too hard for the beginner markets that were still the majority of his clientele. So have some case examples in your back pocket as well before you talk with clients. So, stories are really good at getting people's brains to get it. So they might think that, well, I'm a beginner, I don't really know anybody. Well, if you have a story or a case example from a client you worked with who is similar to their position, and you tell that story and tell them how they overcame that, that can easily reduce this objection. So have some of those examples ready. They think they can do it themselves. So I've heard this, and this will be more if you work in the higher markets in some cases, although certain businesses just want someone to do it for them. The bigger businesses, many of the people I'm working with, they just want someone to do it for them, or they want, someone to just hire the person and work with someone directly. So they think they can do it themselves. Now, I haven't got this one a ton, but you do get this sometimes. Like, well, I think, because I was working with a guy who's very intelligent marketer. He was a referral, bright guy. He was doing about $100K a month through his funnel. And we got to, again, the pointy end of the conversation where we were talking price and structure, and I brought out the sliding scale and did all that kind of stuff. And so I gave him a really high fee or a lower fee plus a percentage. So he took the lower fee plus the percentage. So, but I could tell he was squeamish. It was like, okay, so what is this? Is it a price issue? He's like, no, it's not price. He's like, no, I get that. Your offer's fair. I'm like, well, what is it then? And he's like, because you want to get to if people are squeamish and you're not sure what the objection is, you need to like pin down the objection. And you need to, anyway, he kind of smirked. He was confident in himself. Let's just put it that way. And he said, I think I could probably do this myself. Like, I haven't really made a lot of attempts at tweaking this yet. I could probably go through this myself and do this. And I had a brilliant comeback. And this is something, if anyone ever says this, use this. I said, yeah, you know what? You're a smart guy. You could probably figure this out yourself. But Tiger Woods, when in his prime, was one of the best golfers in the world. Better than any of his coaches. Yet he hired multiple coaches. Why? Because he wanted outside perspective. He can't see all his blind spots, and he wanted other intelligent people to bounce ideas off of, to give outside perspectives. He's like, yeah, I'm like, yeah, you can do this. You could likely do this on your own, but why not for the fee that we have, which would be a small fee compared to what we could generate, collaborate together and put two smart heads together instead of one. That instantly sold him. So that's how you overcome that objection. If you're a coach or consultant or service provider, use the Tiger Woods analogy. I need to think about it. That is, I hate this one, but it's legitimate. I get it. It's, these people are feeling the pressure from you, or they're anxious about making this decision. If you've hired a coach, I've spent a lot of money on mentors and coaches. It is scary. You're like, oh, should I really invest $15,000 or $20,000 or $25,000 or whatever it is? Man, that's a lot of money. And is this the right decision? And the time and the opportunity loss and all that kind of stuff. Because when you put time here, you can't put it over here, and all those things. So I need to think about it. This requires a bit more fleshing out. This requires you to dig to the underlying objection. So if you hear, I need to think about it, you need to dig deeper. So usually here's what I'll say, and I got this from Victor Antonio, who's a sales professional, got a great YouTube channel for anybody listening. Victor Antonio's got some great objection busting YouTube videos. But he says it this way, and I've modeled this in my own words. He says, no, I get it. It can be a big decision. So usually when people tell me they need to think about it, they're either one, trying to be nice to me and they're just not interested, or two, they're interested, but I didn't do a good enough job of addressing something and they're not sure about something. Which one of these is you? And they'll usually say, no, I'm interested, but and then they'll reveal their deeper objections. So, I'm just, the money's a little tight right now or whatever, or, I just got other projects on my plate and those kind of things, and that's where you can look to parry or address the other objections. Now, if it's a legitimate reason, I don't try to hard close people. I find that just brings on more pain and logistics. If people really are struggling kind of on the borderline, at this point, I don't want to work with them. Dig as much as you want here, but these are some tools that you have in your back pocket. Then I need to talk to my partner, particularly in business to business. Obviously, this is a big one. So usually I try in my questionnaire to say, are you the sole decision maker, or do you need to bring on a partner? And if they say, I'm the sole decision maker, perfect. If they say, no, I need to talk with a partner, I'll try to have the partner on the call with me to discuss with them. If I can't do that and we do need to set up another time with the partner, do so on that call and try to pin down a time where they can be available to you. Sometimes they can't do that and it'll get into an open-end situation, in which case your follow-up methods, which I'll talk about in a second, will come into play. But try to keep the loose ends to a minimum. So those are some overall objections you're going to get both for high flow and low flow situations. So your low flow framework's going to be very similar. I'm not going. This will be less time, I promise, on this. Call 1, call 2, call 3. We already went through that. Rapport building, getting their visions, identifying their roadblocks, providing the solutions, deciding if you want to work together towards those solutions, finalizing the agreement deal. First call, again, usually this is, again, low flow. So deal making, percentage deals, higher ticket stuff where you're working like more one-to-one or those kind of things with people. So what made you reach out to me? We already went through this. What's your vision? Where do you want to go? What are the roadblocks? And then I'll recap their problem and prescribe the solution that I feel is helpful for them. And usually at the end of that call, I'll tell them, hey, it's been great to get to know you a little bit. I feel like I can help you. Let's set up another call to go a little deeper. And then I'll lay out kind of the plan. That's when I'll send them the video and all that kind of stuff. And again, these are for people, if you look at their application or you look at their situation, and you think this is someone who could be a potential big ticket deal for a while, this is what I would do. You send them the video, then you review the slides and kind of, tie them to their roadblocks. So, on your first call, we talked about you wanted to do this and here's where your roadblocks. And then, during the video, I talked about these solutions or these ideas to their roadblock, go through those again. Go over the how briefly, like this is what it would look like. We're going to start with this, and then we're going to do this and this. And then ask, would you like to work together on this? Like, would you like to work towards these goals? You're going to share your pricing and you're going to negotiate that. At this second call, I usually do talk about my pricing, which is often a sliding scale, meaning high fee or, with next to no percentage, medium fee, a little bit of a percentage, a little lower fee, higher percentage, and come to a fair agreement somewhere along that sliding scale. And that sliding scale is a game changer for deal makers, for agencies, especially if you're in lead generation or, revenue acceleration, ROI type of stuff. It's a game changer. Then you're going to address the same objections and things like that. And at the end of that call, the second call, which is usually 60 minutes or more, you're going to kind of more or less decide, is this something that we want to pursue? If yes, and they're clear, their objections are there, perfect. Go to call 3. If not, if they're not quite sure, try to set up another call. I have had deals that took more than 3 calls. It took a longer time, but they were bigger ticket deals with people that were very affluent. And, it took a little longer before we got to the deal. Actually, a couple of them have taken like 5 or 6 calls sometimes, and part of it is timing. So, but anyway, in a typical world, if you get to an agreement here, and then tell them you're going to send them an agreement on working together. And I usually send that in a Google document, set up another call. Then we review the documents. If they, we finalize and tweak the language or anything, finalize the scope of working together and all that kind of stuff. Once we're final on all that stuff, and this could take another hour, an hour and a half, then you'll send the document in an e-sign tool like HelloSign is what I use. I use HelloSign.com, which is just an e-signer. I can upload a PDF to it. It's all fillable. People can sign it all electronically, and then you'll take payment at that point. You can be sending an invoice or taking it on the phone. So that is a mouthful. I know. You might want to rewatch that part, but that's some really good gold there. I mean, this is gold. I've done a lot of conversations these past few years, and I've learned from other people much smarter than me as well. So a combination of my own trial and error and learning, hiring mentors, keeping a beat on the industry. This is pure gold right here. If you guys will study it and apply it to your own stuff. Okay, so follow up. Wrap this up. This will just take a couple more minutes, and then we'll be done. 40 minutes isn't too bad on this one. So follow up. So inevitably, there will be situations where loose ends occur or people drop off of the process, and that's just part of being a deal maker. Enrolling deals, and those kind of things. And I'm going to give credit to Steve Gordon of The Unstoppable CEO. You can check out his work. He's got some great books on referral marketing, and he just put out a little course on email follow-up that I borrowed some of this from. And so I'm going to, share, again, I'm unabashedly not afraid to stand on the shoulders of smart people and borrow from them and give them credit. So then I'm going to go through 2 quick emails for you guys, and then we'll wrap this up. It's the next step email and the back burner email. So these are, you might want to take little notes on these. So let's say you send a proposal. Let's say you go through the process, and maybe they either, you unfortunately have a loose end, like you couldn't set the next call, and days are going by. Or you send a proposal or some kind of an invoice, let's say, and they don't pay it right away, or there's some loose ends. Now, that's not good if they're not paying the invoice within the next day or 2. Usually, it's not a good sign. Most clients I've found that are actually going to do it will pay usually within 24 hours or so. So, but let's say you send a proposal, or you send some, an invoice, and you don't hear from them, or you're trying to set up a meeting and they don't respond. So you can send this next step email. It's very easy to send. And a lot of times these short little punchy messages get the higher return rates for responses. So usually maybe 2 or 3 days after the initial message, which could be either the invoice or proposal or meeting, I'll usually just say subject line, next steps. Hey, first name. What's the next step you'd like to take on this project, John? Very much like a little casual conversation. So subject line is next steps. Hey, name. Hey, first name. What's the next step you'd like to take on this project? Very simple. Very simple. You can use that when there's meetings have stalled, when this and that's stalled, you can follow up with that. And then if you don't respond again, you can send them this back burner email. I just used this the other day with a guy, and it got a response. So we did indeed put the project on back burner, but the point of these emails is to get a response. So should I spend more time pursuing this right now or not? If it's a no for right now, they go on your long-term sort of follow-up sequence, or your long-term reminders on your calendar or whatever to reach out, whatever tool you're using to reach out to them later. But usually, let's say like a week to 10 days after that first one, if you don't hear back from them, again, you don't want to come across needy or professional, or, you don't want to come across that way. So, you need to space out your messages enough so that it doesn't seem like you're constantly just like, what are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? It ruins your positioning. So maybe a week to 10 days later, you can say something like closing the loop. Hey, first name, have you put our project on the back burner? Best John. Something like that. And usually it's the way it's worded for whatever reason gets a response. More often, not always, but these emails are designed, these two, to get responses so that you know where to put this person. Are they stopping? Are they going to go in the long-term sort of prospect bin? Are they just ridiculous and you're just going to move on? You need to kind of know where they stand. And so these little emails can be a good way to do that. Seems pretty simple, but they work. And oftentimes these little emails get the best responses. Get the best responses when you're following up. If you ever want people to to talk with you from your email list, I sent out a small little email looking to partner with people to about 5,000 subscribers. This was maybe a couple months ago now. And I had like 40 people respond back interested in it. It was just a simple little email reply if you're interested to know more, that kind of thing. I ended up working with 4 of those people in a partnership sort of thing who had email lists. So anyway, That's what I got for you now. Let me go ahead and check out the Facebook group, but some real gold in there if you'll apply this. Again, I'll put this on YouTube and send out a replay. It's also in the Facebook group as well. So let me go ahead and stop my screen sharing. If you have any questions, if you're on here, feel free to say hi. Let me go over to the Facebook group real quick here and see if we got any questions going down over there. Aaron, like when people ghost. Yeah, exactly, man. Good to see you. Thanks for coming. Any questions while I'm here? Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and step off. I just got a couple people here. I'm going to get back to some work here, but I'll leave this in the group for people who are, interested in reviewing this again. So any quick questions in the group here? Otherwise, I'm going to wrap this up, and I'm actually going to stop the recording now in Zoom so that I can upload this and use this. So go ahead and stop